Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on mastering payments in Dental4Web. My name's Neil, and my colleague Isabella is with us as well. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. This webinar is being recorded, and at the end of the webinar, after the webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording. Everybody is in listening mode, but we do have a chat option and also a Q&A. So what I'd like to ask you to do for me, if you can just put in the chat or the Q&A, your name and the practice you're from and your position, just so I can make sure that the chat and the Q&A is working. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a time for some questions. Key topics we're going to talk about today is treatment color, so color of the treatment items and what they represent. Taking a payment and applying discount. Hello, Nick. Creating and allocating deposits. Payment plan installments, and also processing refunds. So what I'll do now, I'll pass to my colleague Isabella, who will now go through the demonstration with you.
Thanks, Neil. Just give me a second, guys. My Zoom's just playing up. Okay. Perfect. Neil, let me know if you can see my screen.
I can.
Beautiful. All right, welcome everyone. So we're going to get started today on, as Neil mentioned, there's a few key topics that we're going to be going through today. We'll start by going to my test patient today. For our example, we're going to use Melanie. And I'm just going to cover your basic payment colors. Okay. So when we are entering an item number into the treatment tab, if we're going to be taking a straightforward payment, so no health fund involved, once the item numbers have been added into the treatment, we will come up the top here to our new invoice. We then will click Receive Payment. Okay. And we enter in the closing balance, which is on your far right. That will tell you how much the patient is paying out of their pocket. We're going to select $90. We'll hit Tab on our keyboard, and our payment type, I'm just going to use today cash. However, you may use EFTPOS e-payment and put through a card payment. Once that has been received, you will then click Create. And now the payment has gone through. Nice and beautiful. So when we see the color gray, we know that the payment or the invoice has been completely paid. Let's talk about the color red. So red is a color which means that the invoice is outstanding. So there may be a situation where the patient has come and seen you, but they're not able to pay today. So you will then need to create a record in the patient's treatment that they owe you money. By doing this, again, we come up to our new invoice. We're not going to receive payment or put anything through the health fund. All I'm going to do is click Create. Okay, now you can see that the treatment line has turned red, and on the bottom right of my screen, my outstanding status is my $90. Now the invoice that is red will then also show up on your debtors list, so your outstanding money, and then that's when you can go and follow up your debtors. Let's talk about pink. So pink means partly paid. Again, there may be a situation where the patient is going to pay part of the invoice or half of the invoice and pay the other half next time that they come in. Coming up to our new invoice, we're going to select Receive Payment. And you're going to enter in how much the patient is paying today. Now, as I said, it doesn't physically have to be half, so $45. For today's example, I'm just going to put $1. I'm going to select Tab and put my payment type. I'm going to go through auto allocate payments at a later stage, so just mind me while I untick this. And I'm going to say to the system that I want to place that $1 onto this invoice. I will then click Create. Oh, why did that not work? There we go. Okay, so now we've got three colors. Gray is completely paid. Your red is outstanding. So the whole $90 is outstanding. And then we've got pink, which is partly paid. Now there is a purple color that I unfortunately can't show you today. However, if I'm putting through a Medicare claim, for example, or a health fund claim, when I come to my new invoice, and I select my high caps button and I swipe the patient's health fund or I lodge that invoice through to Medicare. Once I click create, that treatment line or treatment lines will go purple. And purple indicates that there is a claim associated to that invoice. Okay, so whenever you see purple, think that the high caps machine was involved in that specific invoice. And as well, the last color is what we call yellow or sand. And this essentially means that nothing has happened to that particular invoice. So you haven't come and clicked new invoice or F2 on your keyboard. Okay. Now, when we are taking a payment and applying a discount, when I come to my new invoice, in this screen here, you can add a discount by percentage or by amount. Now, if the patient is not in a health fund and you're giving a 10% discount, you will type your 10%, you'll click Tab on your keyboard, and again, the system will then generate the closing balance for you, which is your $81. When I come to my receive payment, I then will put in my $81. I will select cash, okay, 81, and I will click create. A little tip that you can do is when you enter in an item code and the patient is in a health fund, instead of trying to figure out the discount from the gap, what you can do is when you click your new invoice, before you click this high caps button down here, if you put in that you're going to give the patient a 10% discount, when you click your high caps button, the claim is not going to be lodged for $81. The system will still send that $90 to the high caps machine. You'll then click your high caps button, swipe the patient's health fund card. Once the gap has been populated, so you're going to have two different gap payments. You're going to have the printout from the high caps machine, which does not include the 10% discount. However, when we go and click receive payment, you need to be making sure you're looking at the closing balance that Dental4Windows is telling you to pay because you've already applied that discount prior to claiming with the health fund. So some people like to figure out the gap after they've claimed from the health fund, but you don't actually need to do that. You can put in the discount amount before claiming. You click the high caps button. That then will figure out the gap with the discounted amount. Okay. When I talk about auto allocate, now this can be a little bit of a confusing one to wrap your head around. If you've got more than one family member in a family with you, so let's just say myself and Neil are together in a family. I am a child dental benefit patient, but Neil, however, is not. If there is an outstanding child benefit claim. Okay, so that those lines are purple. When you go and claim for the other family member, so if I'm going to be claiming for Neil, by default, the system will bring up all the invoices associated to everyone in that family. So when you are going to put through a gap payment or a payment for any patient within that family, notice if I type $90, actually let's use 81 as our example, $81. Notice when I click tab, by default, the system is going to place that $81 on the first outstanding invoice. Okay, so now you can see it's placed the $81 on that first invoice and the closing balance is 9. However, I don't actually want to put that $81 on that first outstanding invoice because that is not what the patient is paying for. So by unticking auto allocate payment, you then physically have to type into the system of where do you want to apply that $81. Okay, so now when I click tab, it registered that I've placed the $81 on that last invoice. So when I go and I click create, that $81 was applied to this last line, and notice how my first invoice that's actually outstanding is still red. Okay, any questions regarding anything that I've gone through before I move on?
We have no questions at this point.
Perfect, all good. Okay, let's talk about deposits. So when we are taking a deposit for a patient, we are going to be creating a receipt. So on my far left of my screen, I'm going to come to my receipt area. Okay, we'll come to our plus sign at the top here, which is our new receipt. You'll enter in the deposit amount that you're wanting the patient to pay. Now I'm just going to place $300 because it will then cancel out these outstandings. If you're doing a card payment for a deposit, you'll select your EFTPOS e-payment and you'll click high caps and you'll put through the card payment. However, I'm going to select cash and I'm going to click create. So now you can see I've got a deposit of $121 on the patient's file. This typically you might take a deposit when you're doing a crown prep. So when the patient's coming in for their crown prep, you'll take the deposit. When the patient comes back to get the crown cemented, that is then when you'll put your item number 613 through. From there, we can then claim with the health fund. Okay, so again, like you normally would take a payment with your new invoice, then you would click your high caps button, swipe the patient's health fund card. When they're ready to pay the gap, we click receive payment. Before you put your gap payment in, you need to make sure that you allocate the deposit first. So the system will tell you if a deposit exists in red. On the far right of the screen, you've got that box. What you'll do is you'll tick this box. The system will automatically place the deposit first for you, and then it'll tell you the closing balance. Okay, you can't do it the other way. If you put the closing balance first and then try and allocate the deposit, it will cancel itself out. So then what you do here, you type in the closing balance, the payment method, again, if it's card or cash, and then you would click create. Okay, and notice now on the bottom right of my screen, my deposit has now disappeared because it has been allocated to an invoice. I'm just going to jump back and add one more deposit. So we'll jump back to our treatment details. Okay, let's talk refunds. So there are two types of refunds you can do. You can refund on treatment that's being performed, or you can refund on deposits. So to refund on a treatment that has been performed, you need to go into the patient's treatment details. Up the top where it says itemized invoices, you'll click this drop down and we will come to new refunds of payment for treatment. Now, all the lines that are highlighted in blue are the items that you can refund or that are available to be refunded. So if I'm going to select more than one line, for example, the system is going to calculate how much all of that is and place it into the amount section. You don't actually need to refund the whole amount, depending on what you are going to refund. For today, I'm just going to say I'm going to refund the patient $150. With my payment type, again, if it's a card payment, you'll select card and you'll click your high caps button and you'll insert the patient's card. If the patient is not physically in front of you at the practice, you can do a bank transfer and you would then select your payment type as direct payment, for example. However, I'm going to select, actually, you know what, let's do direct payment. Okay, once I select that, I'm going to click OK. And then the system will insert the refund item. The description is refund to patient, and it'll tell you the minus figure that you have refunded the patient for. Refunding on a deposit. So again, like deposits, we are always coming into our receipt area because that's where we have taken the money. So I will go to my receipt tab. I will come to my receipt drop-down menu and I'm going to say new refund. The system automatically is picking up the $300 because that is how much the patient is in credit or a deposit. Again, you can overwrite that amount. However, I'm going to refund the whole amount. Payment type, same process. Okay. And then I'm going to click OK. So now you can see on the bottom right of the screen, my deposit has now disappeared. So it's been refunded to the patient. In my receipt tab, you can see there's a history of refunds. Okay, the system will make it red for you. And on the far right of the screen, you can see that refund of the 300 and the refund for the treatment details one that we did before. Okay. Very good. Okay, payment plan installments. So this again is if I'm going to be doing ortho, for example. Okay, I put my item number through. I'm going to put my fee across. When you do your new invoice, there is a section here called number of installments. So up to you what you want to do. I might say to the system, I want to do 12 installments over 12 months or 12 weeks or 12 days, whatever time frame you want. So essentially each month the patient is going to be paying $333.33. So whatever the total invoice is for that particular treatment and whatever time frame and the number of installments, the system will then generate a monthly, weekly, or fortnightly balance that the patient needs to pay. Okay. If the patient's in a health fund and then you want to figure out these installments, what you need to do is before you need to put through the number of installments, You then will click your high caps button. You'll send through that $4,000 to the health fund. And then when the patient is due to pay, that is then when you'll come to your receive payment. And you'll type that 3333, your payment type, and you will click create. And you can see now, because I'm creating it on a monthly basis, the due date is already populated for you under 12 installments. Okay. So once I've put that through and I've put it through the health fund, it's going to stay red because remember, it hasn't been fully paid. However, it is pink because part of the invoice has been paid. In some of your situations, this line will actually be purple if a health fund's involved. If I jump over to my invoices tab, if I hover over that particular invoice, which is already selected, you can see the breakdown of the installments. And you can see that for the first installment, I've received 333. The second installment, nothing has been received. However, there is a due date of the 14th of October. Okay, these patients as well will come up on your debtors, but they'll only show up on your debtors when the payment is actually due. Okay, so if I come to all issued, oh, my debtors list is quite long, but the patient will then show up there. Here we go. There they are. So that's next month. But if I change it to all due, notice how the invoices disappear because that physically is not due yet, because it hasn't come to next month. So if I toggle between all issued and all due, you'll then see that invoice. Okay, so after the 14th of October, then that particular payment or invoice will show up on your debtors list so you can keep track of what's due. There is a way as well that you can have an alert pop up. So within the patient details area, you can create an alert to pop up on the screen of when the patient is due to pay. But ideally, you want to be making those monthly appointments or 6 weekly appointments for ortho around the time that the patient's due to pay so that you can put that payment through. However, in your medical history area of the patient's file, if you come down to your alert notepad, we could select an alert type. We could call it payment for ortho, for example. I'll just do general, payment due, for example, and then I can say on this date and select the 14th of September or 13th and the date and time. And you can actually select which computer you want that alert to pop up for. So if you don't want it to pop up on the clinic computer, you just want it to pop on the front desk or practice manager computer. That is then when you'll tick that and you'll click OK. When the date and time that you've specified has come, that alert then will pop up. So you physically don't need to be in the patient's file to have that alert popped. Okay. Very good. Any questions? No?
We don't have any questions at the moment, but if you do, feel free to just type it into the chat or the Q&A.
Because that's pretty much the payment section of Dental4Web.
Thank you, Isabella.
Thanks, Neil. Anything off the top of your head, Neil, that you think might be beneficial?
You've covered pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do now, I'm just going to put up a question. And what I'd like to do for me, if you can, if you'd like to type in there topics you would like to see for future webinars. so that we can make sure that our webinar content is matching what you're wanting to see. Or again, feel free to type into the chat.
We've got some recalls, we've got reporting, we've got treatment. Okay, we've got a bit, Neil.
Okay,
We can figure that out for next month.
not a problem at all.
Beautiful.
So we just have some resources available. So we have our e-support, which is a very good function for you to be able to go in and find answers to questions. Our website has information there as well. And we also have a feature called the Learning Center, which is where you can actually go in and run courses. And of course, you have email, which is where you can email our support department. So I'd like to thank you all for attending today. And as I mentioned, you'll receive an email with the recording to this webinar. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.